Hi guys, it's Silverette again, and today I'm moving on from the tower to some other buildings, and by the way, that skyscraper has kind of officially been dubbed Kamina Tower by me right now, but that might of course change when I feel like, nah, I'm not gonna name it that, but for now it's called Kamina Tower. But today I'm actually building 3 buildings, which in terms of quality are pretty consistent if you ask me. I kind of like all 3 of them equally, they're pretty cool. And the first one is this manor-ish building, for which I decided to basically overuse the main street sets, which in hindsight maybe wasn't the greatest idea because it kind of came out as, once again, a theme park-ish building, but then again, it could be, I don't know, a factory or an office of some sort, which just wanted to be fancy in a way. So yeah, as you can see, adding those very, well, those signature roofs that the main street buildings always have. And of course I had some problems with the corners over there, but just decided to go with that after all. But yeah, I do like the general shape and the look of this building. It's just that it almost feels like it's too fancy to actually be in a city. So maybe it's time for me to drift away from the idea I'm just building a city in Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 and go towards the idea I am building the ideal city in Rollercoaster Tycoon 3. Though that might also be dangerous because people could easily say, well, those buildings are pretty good, but they're not the best thing. That's not an ideal city. What are you doing? And an ideal city basically does not exist. Saying that you're creating something ideal is always something that, yeah, it's something you shouldn't say. Definitely. I want to be somewhat careful about that. Now at this point I felt like add a roof railing, and then I felt like no, don't add a roof railing, so I decided to remove it, but I kept it on the spire just because fancy spire is fancy, so that's really awesome. And at that point, I think that building is pretty much finished. Just time for some nice little trees around it. And as always, I am kind of stuck in the pickle where I'm like, okay, I want to have a big tree, but it shouldn't be too big. It shouldn't hit the buildings. It shouldn't be too high. It should be the perfect size. It shouldn't be too small either, because you do want a tree and not a little bush something. So that's always a bit hard, but decided to go with that. And of course, dormers are very important, and awnings, just because they look fancy, so might as well go for it. And then decide to remove them and replace them with those, because they're even fancier. And of course, little path thingies like those things, and planters. In terms of planters and stuff like that, also benches, I think this building came up pretty nice. And at that point I decided, no, I'm not going to go with those bricks, I'm just going to go with the same floor tile paths, and of course add a little border around that, because I don't want the thingies to go through each other and make the textures glitch and stuff like that. And of course it's also bench spamming time, because I don't only like spamming flowers, I also like spamming benches, because benches are awesome. But anyway, it's time to move on to the next building, and this is just going to be somewhat of an office-ish building, one of those office buildings which are kind of fancy, and they're my favorite office buildings, because I don't want my office buildings to just be, well, squares, cubes, basically stuff like that, not the boring old stuff. I want them to at least look fancy. You know how you sometimes have these buildings, at least over here you have them, where the company that owns them is basically like, okay, we're an awesome company, so you want to work in an awesome building. So that's when they create buildings like that, or at least get someone to do them. But basically, oh wow, I just saw OBS. I definitely should have edited that out, but whatever. I'm not even going to bother with that anymore. Screw it. It was just 1 split second anyway. But anyway, yeah, I'm recording with OBS by the way these days, because I used to be recording with Fraps, but yeah, as you might know, Fraps actually records in AVI files, uncompressed, and they're enormous. After one recording session of just one Let's Play or something like that, I would have 80 gigs of videos that I would have to render and time-lapse, and that costs so much space, so much, well, disk space of course, so much time, and it also didn't allow me to do anything other than that video, because as soon as I recorded one video, I wouldn't have any space left on my laptop, so that wouldn't work out. So I'm actually really glad that I'm recording with OBS right now, because the quality is just a little bit lower, but I think it's a good thing, because I've now been able to actually bulk record. So this weekend I've actually been recording non-stop pretty much, so that was really awesome. But anyway, back to the building. As you can see, it's kind of shaping up in a very nice way, and I just felt like adding a blue border over there because blue is awesome. And I even got to use my own classical set, which I didn't expect, because I don't really like it as much as I would have liked to like it. That came out weird, but anyway, I hope you get what I mean. But at that point I felt like, I'm just gonna add fancy doors underneath it. And of course the same old Shy Guys windows, because why the hell not? Because they look great. Might as well go for it. I might spam the same window at multiple places, but if there's no window that looks better in a certain situation, well, I guess I can go for it. And of course balconies, because balconies are awesome. And little brick things. And at that point, this building is almost finished, because it's not going to be that complicated. All I still kind of had to do was add a window to the wall on the back side of that glass tower, but I decided to not even do it this episode. I don't really think it matters. Now at that point, I start building a building, which I'm not even going to finish yet, and only going to plan that I'm going to have a little gallery over there. And that's pretty much it. Now it's time to move on and add a building over here. I kind of wanted to create a building that's similar to those two glass buildings that I already have on the sides there. And these are some of my favorite buildings in the town, so I definitely wanted to create something that would go well with them. So there's quite some experimentation with this one. So I'm sorry if I, well, place things and then decide to remove them like I'm doing right now. This actually looks pretty funny. Didn't even realize that. Sometimes time-lapsed things are just better than when they're not time-lapsed. And decided to remove that one again. It's just amazing how I only made a 1H wall in this set, and then have to deal with all that placing of hundreds of walls just to create one building. And I decided to just go with brick molding, just simple things. I didn't want to take any risk with this building, simply because I wanted to create something nice right away. And I'm just going to add a little, well, blue-ish glass tower in front of it. And then I felt like, no, I need to make it bigger, and then it looks really stupid. So I decided to remove that again and just go with a small tower. I wish there was actually like a tower that would be 1.5 squares wide, but of course that it's not really possible, so I had to go with this instead. But as you can see at this point, the general shape of the building is pretty much, well, shaping up, I guess. And that's also, well, it's time for me to give tips again. That's also what I usually do, and what I find really works out well is when you first create a general shape of a building before you move into the real details, so you can see what it looks like in its surroundings, and then when you're sure that you want to move on with it and that you really like the way it's going to look when it's really finished with all the details on it, then you decide to add the details. So the way I did it with this building is just create the shape first and then put windows and dormers and all the little railing things and whatever the stuff is that I added to it. Also these frames. And yeah, that basically works out in the end, because I kind of like this building. It's not that complicated. It's a pretty simple building. It's honestly, it's just a cube with a glossy thing in front. But I just like the general idea of having that, so that really worked out in the end. And of course, I also like adding trims everywhere. That's something that I'm really often guilty of, and I probably should stop doing for some buildings, because otherwise it's gonna be everywhere, but I don't think I really care anyway. And then I messed with Station Gym's dormers, and that didn't work out in the end. So decided to just discard that and go with Shy Guys, because they're awesome. And I think I'm pretty content with the colors of this. It's kind of, as soon as I did this, I was reminded of Railgun, because I have the light blue-ish color with the orange brown-ish color, so that looks pretty funny. And I was like, damn, it's Railgun all over again. But it looks good, so whatever. And then at that point I'm like, why did I remove those windows? I'm not even sure, probably because I didn't want to overuse things. But also it looked a bit empty. Well, I need to give myself that, it did look a bit empty. So it's probably a good idea to go with those things instead. And of course, as always, time to add little things. Little arcs of course over there, and little planters and stuff like that. Trees just generally, it's funny, when you have a building that's not as great as you would have liked it to be, I'm just like, man, I'm just gonna kind of subtly cover it up with trees. Then nobody will be able to see it, or at least kind of drift the attention away from the ugly parts of the building towards those little trees next to it. So that's pretty funny. And of course, it's time to spam planters on the sides as well. Did I also put benches over here? I would be surprised if I didn't, because I always spam benches everywhere, but it seems like I didn't do that this time. Still need to do that then. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this episode, and see you all in the next episode, in which I'm going to create one more building, and I think also a new skyscraper, so till then.